Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. My clock puts it at about 10:59. We'll get started in about 60 seconds. Could somebody just message me to confirm that you can hear me and see the screen? Thanks. Thanks, Emma. That's great. We'll get started in about 60 seconds. Okay, numbers are slowly building up. I'll just give them a few more seconds if nobody minds, and then I'll just fire away. I trust everybody's managed to stay out of the rain this morning. Bit of a surprise, really. A few seconds more and then we'll fire away. Okay, well, let's get started. As you can see, today's webinar is realising the economic potential of community engagement and participation. Today's webinar is sponsored by the local government professionals, as I'm sure you know. My name's John Carlson. My background's in psychology, education and business. Most of my work these days is in consumer behaviour. I also sit on a number of boards and advise organisations, including local government, on marketing issues. I've been doing this for about 25 years. It's probably closer to 30, but 25 sounds better. 6 topics I just want to run across today. The first is defining what I mean by engagement. The second is perhaps to provide some statistics to demonstrate that engagement is low. To look briefly at the cost of that low engagement, and there's quite a lot of data on that. Look at failed strategies for driving engagement, that is the strategies we're using now, which just aren't delivering outcomes. Look at some successful strategies for driving engagement, and then the benefits of high engagement, which I suspect you're well aware of. So let's get started with a definition. The dictionary provides 2 definitions, the first being an agreement to do something or go somewhere at a fixed time. That's not the definition we're dealing with today, or that's not the kind of engagement we're dealing with today. We're talking about a dynamic relational process that facilitates communication, interaction, involvement, and engagement between an organisation, a community for a range of social and organisational outcomes. And I'm fairly sure that's the kind of definition you were expecting. The key components of that, or the key requirements of that, are firstly that there is active articulation. That is that both sides are talking. Everybody involved in the interaction is talking. It's also important that everybody involved in the interaction is listening. That's very rare. Much of the communication you put out is not listened to, and many of the people that receive it feel they're not being listened to. That engagement also requires purposeful interaction. That is, I'm interacting for a reason, to get something out of it for myself and for others. And there is a purposeful exchange of value. That is, there is something in it for all parties involved. And if there's not a purposeful exchange of values, then it's not going to be sustained. People are only going to interact so long as they can talk, they can be listened to, there is purposeful interaction, and they feel there's value for them. And if those things occur, that creates a sense of belonging. I belong here, therefore I should continue to be here. I should stay here and not go somewhere else. Within that, I guess there are two broad types of engagement. There's discrete and continuous. If we talk about discrete engagement for a moment, think property development. You know, it's when a property developer comes along and does it looks at specific issues at a specific time. Should this development go up or whatever? It rarely leads to community support as much as the developer might suggest it does. And very often it's expensive window dressing. But it's about, at a point in time, let's see what people think about a project or something we're about to do and get some feedback from it, where the principal objective is to be seen to be consulting or to be seen to be engaging more than actually getting the impact in many instances. The second form, which is what I want to concentrate on today, is continuous engagement. That is engaging people over the long term, remaining engaged with people over several weeks, months, years, or whatever. And in this regard, I'd ask you to think talkback radio. You know, people who tune into a talkback radio program every morning and they ring in occasionally, but they listen intently and they send in SMSs and texts and then perhaps they even engage on the website. That's the kind of engagement I'm talking about. And it's around groups with features in common. And the people who listen to a particular talkback radio station have things in common. People who are in your community have things in common. It actively drives participation. People don't just listen to talkback radio, they participate in it. They do send the SMSs. They do make the calls. They do yell and scream at the radio when nobody else can hear, and all of these kinds of things. And also, this continuous engagement actually saves money when well done. Perhaps not for radio stations, but for the local government example, which I'm going to talk about through this webinar, is a very effective way of saving money. My argument would be very strongly that discrete engagement costs money and delivers very little return, whereas continuous engagement saves money and delivers a substantial return. And I'll try to demonstrate that as we go through today's webinar. And of course, then there's the engagement. I'm reliably informed this is not a Hitler salute, but this is actually a sporting event where people are clearly engaged with what's going on, and that's what I mean by engagement. So, we know now what I mean by engagement. Let's talk about the reality of low engagement. The fact is, 30% of Australians now live alone. That's a staggering number. 30% of Australians live not with a friend or with children, they live alone. And then to those, you've got to add those who share with a friend who they may or may not see on a regular basis, and those who live with a child. Well, a lot of Australians are not connected, are not engaged, at least in their home life, with people outside of that home or inside that home. Less than 31% of Australians now volunteer. That's much lower than it was during the 70s, 80s. Less than 46% of Australians say that they have helped a neighbour at least once a year. Less than 27% of Australians now play an organised sport, whether at a community level or at a professional level. Less than 8% of Australians attend church 2 monthly or more, which is well down on previous years, for better or for worse. And less than 5% of Australians now belong to unions. We think about Australia as having a unionised workforce. Well, the reality is it doesn't. These numbers, in some senses, are not surprising, but they certainly should be quite concerning, because they show that community and community engagement is breaking down, as do these numbers. 27% of people vote in local government elections. That doesn't suggest they're very engaged, or at least not until something upsets them. Less than 0.3% of Australians belong to the Australian Labor Party, and less than 0.5% of people belong to the Liberal Party. You know, during the 70s or 60s and 70s, political party membership was quite high in Australia. It's now negligible. Art gallery attendance has fallen by 2 percentage points every year since 1990. Museum attendance has fallen 88 percentage points since 1990, and botanical garden attendance has fallen by 5 percentage points since 1990. So on just about any level, the engagement of communities in their community, or the engagement of individuals in their community, is in fairly significant decline. And that decline is compound. It's year on year on year. And it's perhaps nowhere better reflected than in the coffee shop. The coffee shop, some sociologists suggest, came out of the lack of connectedness in our communities. Because people were living alone, because they weren't connected with other people, they went into coffee shops where they could feel connected. The disturbing thing about this photograph in this coffee shop, of course, is that all three of the individuals are on an electronic device. They're not actually connected with each other. One of them is sitting alone, and if you go into coffee shops, you'll regularly see 30 to 40% of people sitting absolutely alone. That is, they are still not really engaged or connected. They're just in an engaged space, and this reflects the decline in connectedness and engagement, and it's going to increase, and it is expensive. So let's talk about the cost of low engagement. Those costs are both social and economic. There was a report out today on the cost of mental illness in Australia. Well, that's an economic cost, but there's also associated with that a social cost, and there is increasing evidence to suggest that a big part of that is due to a lack of engagement. It's interesting to note that the people that live the longest, there's a myth out there that longevity is genetically based. Well, in fact, genetics is the third most important factor in longevity. The second most important factor is lifestyle, that is whether you smoke, drink alcohol or whatever. But the most important factor is whether you're connected. Old people that live with their children live longer, perhaps to the chagrin of their children, but they do. Old people that are still in couples live longer. Old people that live alone live a considerably shorter period of time, even those who don't mind being alone. So in addition to the economic cost, there is a social cost. Some of those economic and social costs are decreased participation. People, as we saw from the stats that I just spoke about, are participating less and less. Volunteers are needing to be replaced by paid staff or services reduced. I'm sure you've come across that, but you see community or volunteer organisations winding down their offering because they simply don't have the money to get the paid staff to replace the volunteers who have disappeared. Sporting and community groups are under significant fundraising pressure, and people just are not giving to those groups as they once did, nor are they, as I just said, volunteering. The declining capacity to raise sponsorship dollars. It's getting harder and harder to raise sponsorship dollars, not just from government, but from any source, because there are not that many people engaged with the events whereby the sponsor is able to get a return from that sponsorship. A sponsor is looking for eyeballs. They're looking for a return on the investment. If they feel that nobody's turning up to these events or nobody's engaged with these events or these initiatives, why would they sponsor them? And increasing isolation, homelessness, mental health problems, both of which I've touched on. But my office is in the city. I walk through the city every morning, and people sleep. There are people sleeping in every third doorway as I walk up William Street. This is all part of isolation and a breakdown in community. There are increasing levels of dissension and associated costs. We've seen the disputes in Melbourne this week with regard to the mining conference. Perhaps that's one level of dissension, but local government sees dissension all the time in terms of people just not agreeing with their decisions, and perhaps not agreeing because they're not sufficiently engaged to understand the decisions and why they're being made and what benefits they actually offer. There's increased levels of cost associated with communication. It's becoming, because people aren't engaged, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to communicate with them. It's harder to cut through, to get to their eyes and their ears. There are increasing costs associated with community consultation. It's well and good to say, let's go and do some consultation, let's have some focus groups, but you've got to pay people more and more to attend focus groups. You've got to feed them more and more. You've got to invest more money in recruitment. It's becoming harder and harder to consult. Surveys now, telephone surveys, are getting huge refusal rates, which increase the costs of the survey. And those refusal rates are due to the fact that people see nothing in it for them to answer the questions. They feel no engagement with the issue being discussed. There are increasing costs associated with market research. The point I was just alluding to, market research is becoming more and more expensive, largely because there's less and less engagement and less belief that the data will be used for anything useful or anything that favours the respondent. There's increased costs of policing and security. When people are engaged with their community, they self-police a lot more than when they don't engage. And when there's low engagement, people ignore what's going on around them, and the need for security increases. And there's increased demands, of course, of all of this on local government. The lack of social engagement ends up costing local government a bomb, as it does other levels of government, as indeed it does the private sector, and as it does community organisations like this. I mean, in 2000, Rotary internationally had 1.2 million members. By 2016, it had 1.2 million members. And that's despite the fact that they'd picked up 400,000 members in the subcontinent over that period. In other words, they'd lost 500,000 members throughout the world, elsewhere in the world, through that period. And the average age of a Rotarian in Australia now is 74. The average age in the United States is 78. This organisation is dying. It won't exist 15 years from now. And this reflects that lack of engagement. And when you think of all the things that Rotary gives to the community, addressing polio, doing all the various things they do, those things will not be done 15 years from now, if not 10, perhaps even 5 years from now. But of course, we're working really hard to fix this lack of engagement. I mean, I'm sure you're doing a lot every day to try and make the community more engaged. In terms of discrete engagement, that is the property development or the project development sort of engagement. We're doing charrettes and we're doing, clever community meetings and focus groups. In terms of continuous, we're building lovely websites and we're sending out newsletters and we're doing events. And we're finding they're not working. There is still not engagement. You build a website, people might visit it, but do they read it? Do they spend time there? How many pages do they visit? And does it really address the issues they're interested in? And do they come back? Certainly, the research I've done suggests that while people say they read newsletters, they don't. And certainly they don't read them in any detail. And certainly they don't spend time pondering the issues in them. And in response to that, we're building better and better websites at higher and higher costs. We're having better and better events with better and better attractions at higher and higher costs. We're trying to improve the timing and perhaps incurring overtime costs and all of those kinds. We're spending more on promotion. We're lowering the price of these events and functions and engagements. And we're communicating more. And still, we're not getting a result. And still, the level of community engagement is in decline, as the figures I've shown you already demonstrate. And my argument to you quite strongly is you can build better and better websites, you can have better and better events and better timing, and you can address the pricing, communication and promotion, and they will still decline. None of this has worked. And the problem is it's getting worse and it's not going to get better unless we change the way we look at community engagement. And this is partially because the world is living online whilst local government is playing online. Local governments like to have websites and they think because they've got a website, they're online. They like to do a bit of digital marketing and they think because they're doing digital marketing, they're online. They might even send the newsletter out by email and think now we're online, but they remain petrified of social media, petrified of criticism that might come by way of social media, and don't use all the other tools that the online environment provides them with. And I think this is a big part of the local government problem with regard to engagement, and contributes to the broader situation. Now, if you don't like social media, and if you're not using social media, just consider these numbers. 15 million Facebook users in Australia. There's only 24 million of us. 15 million use Facebook. 15 million Australians use YouTube each and every month. 9 million Australians use Instagram. 7 million Australians use WhatsApp. 6.4 million use Snapchat. 4.7 million Australians use Twitter. 4.5 million Australians use LinkedIn. Now compare that to what we know about the media. Less than 10,000 people watch the Sky News on Foxtel. If television stations could have the audience that social media has, they'd be laughing. But the fact of the matter is they're not making money because they don't have those audiences. Those audiences are on social media platforms. And if you want to compare the performance of these social media platforms to local newspapers, state newspapers, national newspapers, or indeed just about any other form of communication, they still don't measure up. We live in a social media world. 60% of X and Y generation claim to get their news first and foremost from social media. If you're not on social media and you're not using social media effectively, you're not communicating. And that doesn't mean sending a tweet a day. It doesn't mean posting a nice photo a day. It means being on there every hour of every day. Consider some more stats on that. 79% of Australians now use social media. 59% of Australians access social media at least daily. 59% every day. And the average Australian is now spending 8 hours per week on social media. If you're not on social media, you're not communicating. And then, of course, I get the old line, but older people don't use social media. Well, depending on your definition of older, these are the numbers for Australia. 40 to 45, 4 million. 55 to 64, 1.6 million. 65 plus, 1.2 million. Older Australians, like everybody else, use social media. And what's more, they're the fastest growing segment in terms of people, and they're the fastest growing users of social media. And if you think social media is not important, just think about how often you see this. These people are out in the community. They are engaging, but they're not engaging face to face. And as bad as I think this is, as shocking as that image might be, this is reality, and you're not going to change it. So what are some successful strategies for driving engagement? You know, the strategies we've used haven't worked. So what can we do that might work? Well, I've got one here, and I think it's a key, and it's not expensive. It involves building an exclusive online community that brings the offline community together. Because people are online, let's leverage that. But not just online, let's bring it also offline so that they engage initially online and they come then back into the offline environment. And this is very different to building a website, because online engagement or an online community, which is what I'm talking about, building an online community, people who communicate online through a community which you are a part, involves every individual and organisation in the region being able to belong and feeling a sense of belonging on this community. So it's somewhere everybody feels comfortable to be if they live within the region. Secondly, it's where every individual or organisation can communicate and advocate safely. It's an environment where they feel safe reading, learning, communicating. And it's not difficult to provide safety. Indeed, it's a lot easier to provide safety in these contained communities than it is on Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else. And thirdly, every individual and organisation can engage with each other day in and day out. It becomes an environment in which everyone can communicate with everyone and feel safe and comfortable doing it. And by everyone, I mean it's an environment that involves residents, it involves business, it involves the clubs, it involves the charities, the community groups, the local government itself and its staff, state government agencies, federal government agencies. It is an online community that involves everybody. So at the centre of it lies this online community, and it brings together local retailers, local government, local charities, local services, local clubs, and of course, local individuals, all into an online community. And that community works because it delivers the 6 things that every member of your community needs or wants or seeks in life. It delivers certainty. It delivers certain information that they need, and it will always be there. It delivers variety. There's always something new or a new conversation or something new to engage with. It delivers significance. It makes them feel important because they can share their opinions and they know that people are listening to those opinions. It creates a sense of connectedness. It allows them to communicate with each other and with their local government. It helps them to grow because they learn something. They get something out of it that makes them feel more today than they were yesterday. And it helps them to contribute. They can engage with the charities and the other social organisations on the community platform and feel that they are actually contributing to their community. Just stepping away a little from the community issue to these 6 points in more detail then, every human being in a first world country seeks these 6 things. We all want to know that the sun's going to rise tomorrow and our car will start in the morning. We want certainty. We want to know the news we want is going to be there. Unless we're children, we don't want to watch the same movie over and over and over again. So we want variety. We want things there that are going to stimulate us, make us interested. That's why people don't go back to websites. They visit once and don't go back because there's nothing new tomorrow that wasn't there today. You're asking me to read the same thing over and over and over and over again, which of course a community isn't like that. It does provide new stuff every day, and you, the local government, doesn't have to produce that new stuff. It comes from other members of the community, the charities, the businesses involved. We all want significance. You know, when you go into a shop and they treat you like you're a perambulator for a credit card rather than a human being, you don't feel good. You want to feel you're important. You want to feel that at least your opinion will be listened to. And an online community provides the opportunity for people to listen, for people to engage, for people to criticise, or whatever it might be. Then we all want to connect. I made the point earlier that people who connect live longer. We all want to think that there are people we can communicate with, and we find that harder and harder. And an online community helps in that regard. We all want growth. We all want to be more tomorrow than we were yesterday. We want to be richer or better educated or faster if we're a runner or whatever. We want to be more today than we were yesterday. And finally, we all want to make a contribution. We all want to feel that we are making the world a better place. All of these things can be readily and easily delivered with little input from a local government if you build an online community. And that online community might look like this. This is an existing online community where it provokes conversations and blogs and chat, and where there's memorabilia and things like that on it. It's a place where people feel at home, where they can come and engage and share ideas and discuss things that are happening within their local government area or their community in general, where charities can promote what they're doing. It becomes like the old community square where people used to sit around and share the stories of life. And this is how that sort of format might look for a local government. It's branded for the local government. It looks nothing like anybody else's. You know, the design can be massaged, but there are standard platforms on which you can reskin and start operating an online community immediately. And in my experience, it will take you about 2 minutes, or let's be reasonable, 2 weeks to build it and put it together, and probably a year for it to reach its full potential without a huge amount of ongoing effort. And you can even connect retail to it. The one I just showed you, the green one, has retail connected to it. So retailers can actually do business. I mean, this is an optional extra, but where retailers can do business and perhaps even the local government take a commission on that, which funds the project as a whole, but you know, that's optional. So the deliverables of these online communities are quite clear. The first one is communication. You can communicate with your audience almost for nothing. You can participate in the blogging. You can participate in the forums. You can run ads on the site. You can run advertorials. You can contribute popular articles, and you could message people. All of those give you avenues for communicating with everybody on the site, everybody in the community who's part of this free community. And the cost of those kinds of communication, zip, nothing. And the readership, because it's going to the community from the community, goes through the roof. And it even gives you the capacity to use tools like video to better communicate. You know, 80% of all content online now is video. And an online community gives you an excellent format to incorporate video, which doesn't, by the way, need to be professionally produced. Because it's a community, it can be a simple message with face to camera, but it reduces the cost of communication substantially. Secondly, the second deliverable of these online communities is data. You've got Google Analytics, which provides you with, you know, who's reading what, who's doing what on the site. You've got surveys and polls, so you can survey questions, you can run polls, you can have competitions and quizzes built around issues that are important to you. You can monitor the comments on posts or the articles that you post, and you can monitor all the things that are being said between the individuals on the site. This gives you a level of data about your audience that you've never had before. And the cost? Zip. Absolutely nothing. All members of the community can participate, and you can gather the data from those community members without investing anything at all. Quite a lot less than undertaking a survey. And the third, and perhaps most important of the deliverables, is engagement. You know, the history and nostalgia, the fun and games and the news and information engage people with the online community itself. But the online community also then provides avenues for online and offline event promotions, that is, events held online or offline. And you can hold online events, webinars like we're holding now, or community discussions, which can readily be held through those. So you can hold your focus groups through the community and have any number of participants and not pay them anything. Online and offline group promotion, online and offline cause promotion. By building the sense of community online and providing a platform for promoting events, groups and causes, you build the offline activity quite substantially, because now you're actually communicating with people. They're hearing the message, they're communicating with each other, and they're seeing the advantages of participating. So what are the benefits of this higher level of engagement, and particularly the benefits if you go through this, this community route? Well, they're threefold, as I just said. Firstly, reducing marketing communication costs. You can reduce them 40, 50%. Decreasing poor decision-making due to superior data. You'll get much less criticism if you have the data which allows you to make decisions which the community supports. And the reduced costs, there's a typo there, associated with this declining community, the economic costs associated with declining volunteering, etc. Online communities can be a very effective way of encouraging online volunteering. And there are, of course, any number of stats on this. 86% of Fortune 500 companies in the US report online communities providing valuable customer insights. They see it as a better way of learning about their community. 96% of US corporations see value in online customer collaboration. That is, working with customers because if they're a member of a community, they feel like they're working together to find solutions to issues, to find the best way forward on controversial things or for product development. 61% of corporations in the US have or are establishing an online community now. And 64% say that online communities have improved their decision making. These are pretty compelling numbers. Unfortunately, most of them relate to the US, but that's because similar research hasn't been done in Australia. Some more stats. 66% of businesses in the US are using online communities for product development, a point I made a moment ago. 71% are using online communities for market research, almost eliminating the costs associated with market research. 36% are using fewer expensive surveys as a result of using online communities. 96% of companies see value in customer collaboration. 33% of companies report that branded communities alone have changed marketing plans and products, and 80% of marketers indicate that building a brand community has increased traffic and engagement. Online, you can run a campaign to increase traffic to your website, but that does not improve engagement. All it means is somebody went there to see what's there. It doesn't mean they read it, it doesn't mean they engage with it, and it doesn't mean they're going to come back. But an online community addresses all of those issues. So in summary, the most effective engagement is continuous. This static, from time to time engagement is more expensive, produces doubtful results, and in my view, is often not much more than window dressing. Whereas building a community which facilitates online, ongoing engagement, that is, you are always engaged, is much more cost effective and delivers much better results and much better consensus and a much greater sense that people have been consulted. Traditional engagement methods will fail more and more. You can change the timing, the size, the attractions, the location, whatever of these events, as much as you like. You can do what Rotary has done and try every trick in the book to try and prevent the decline in the engagement that they're involved with, and find, just as they did, that the only growth areas for them are online clubs, which are growing at a staggering rate. People are quite happy to attend a charitable event or do something as a result of their online engagement with Rotary, but they're not happy to attend meetings anymore. They're not happy to attend dinners anymore or luncheons or whatever. They don't mind doing stuff, but they don't want to socialise in the way they used to. Online communities build offline communities. You get the engagement online, you develop the relationships online, and those people then want to do stuff together offline. And finally, online communities save money. And just to recap on that, websites might get traffic, but they don't encourage engagement. They don't build relationships. Newsletters, they might say they read them, but they probably don't. And if they do, they don't read them in any depth. The advertising messages you send out compete with the 8,000 other messages that the average person sees every day for their attention. And if those advertisements are placed in local newspapers, there's no attention to compete for. They just don't have an audience anymore. Surveys and market research is expensive, and online communities can reduce, if not eliminate, this cost. Action taken that communities object to. If you take action on the result on the basis of input through an online community, the level of objection decreases substantially, and negative community reactions also reduce substantially, because you have that engagement, because you have that sense of belonging that I started this webinar by talking about. So here's some actions that I think you might take. Cut your losses on traditional engagement. Just stop investing in that stuff. It isn't going to work. Research online community engagement. Look at the work that's been done around the world on brand communities. Look at the technologies that are available. It's not outrageously expensive. I have a platform myself, which is one of the reasons why I'm so fanatical about them, called Curator, but there are others out there. And learn about how powerful this is. Thirdly, educate the Luddites about online communities and about online communication in general. Until you embrace the online environment, until you go from playing to living online, you are not going to catch up with the audience. You are not going to catch up with people like those 3 kids we saw sitting on that park bench. They communicate online. They don't communicate in the ways, they don't read newsletters, they don't read community newspapers, they don't listen to community radio, they don't listen much to television, or they don't watch television much anymore. They live in a very different world. And when you do get the Luddites on site, start small and develop over time. That way it won't cost much, and you will, however, get the results. Just one final fact before we move to the closing part of the webinar. Firstly, this is the fact, sorry, your organisation will do this. The only questions are when and how much money will you waste between now and then. You will, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, have an online community. It's inevitable. The only question is, how much money are you going to waste between now and then with traditional communication, with traditional engagement that has failed and will continue to fail? So look at online communities and think about building an online community. If you'd like me to come and talk to you about online communities, just give me a call or send me an email. I'm very passionate about this, as you can probably tell from the way I'm speaking about it. It is a real opportunity, not just for local government, but for all kinds of organisations. It's not only an opportunity, it's a necessity. So I'm happy to come along and have a half an hour chat with people about this, or to have a chat on the phone. You might also like to think about whether you want to attend my next webinar, which is called Building a Brand that Increases Productivity, Sales and Margins Without Advertising. You'll get a taste of how disparaging I am towards advertising in that webinar, and how powerful building culture is to building a brand, and just how effective a brand local governments can develop with very little expenditure on anything other than culture. If you want to know more about this or any of the subjects that I've discussed today, please go to my website. There's an address there. That's an image of the site. As I said, if I can help with anything, if you want to talk about any of these issues more, just email johnc@linkintegrated.com or give me a call on 0402 273 350. Once again, thanks to the local government professionals for sponsoring this event. Picasso Capital Management is the name of my business. I will be emailing to all of you who attended this webinar today a copy of the webinar, or at least of the video of the webinar, so you get the slides plus my charming voiceover. That'll be with you perhaps by lunch, but if not, certainly soon after lunch. Again, as I say, if you have any questions about any of the issues raised here, please email me. You can also message me now. You've got a message platform there. This is the second last webinar this year. Sorry, it's the third last this year. I've just completed the 2020 program with LG professionals. and that'll be coming out soon. During that webinar series, you'll be able to actually engage by voice with me, and we'll have a discussion as we go through these webinars. But thank you for your attendance today, and I hope that something I've said lights up a spark in your mind and leads to some action. Happy engagement. Thank you.